The engines hummed beneath a sea of clouds, another quiet flight, another celebrity slipping through the skies. Unnoticed until one message changed everything. A Lionel Boyce, the breakout star of The Bear, was midair when the news hit his phone, a headline. That should have made him smile. An Emmy nomination, the dream, the moment. But instead of joy, there was panic, witnesses say. His hands began to shake. He stood suddenly, breathing hard, eyes darting in front of a stunned cabin. He dropped to his knees. Flight attendants rushed. Panic swept through the island. Somewhere over the ocean, Lionel Boyce collapsed. What followed was chaos, a grounded jet, conflicting reports, and a silence from Lionel that only deepened the mystery. This wasn't celebration, this was something darker. What really happened that night in the sky? Why did joy spiral into a full emotional breakdown? And who tried to hide it from the world? Truth starts now. It doesn't end where you think it does. It started like any other evening flight. Out of New York, the cabin was dim, the city lights below slowly fading into the dark velvet of night. Lionel Boyce had boarded early. Wearing his signature red jacket and a plain cap, pulled low eyes, tired voice low, he kept to himself as he slipped into his seat in first-class noise-canceling headphones, on script notes on his lap. It was supposed to be a quiet trip to Los Angeles. Another press week, another round of interviews, nothing out of the ordinary. The flight attendants greeted him with practiced smiles. They'd recognized him, of course they had. He was the heart of The Bear, a fan favorite, a rising force in Hollywood. But Lionel didn't smile back. Not fully. His nod was polite, his eyes distant, like something was already pulling at his thoughts. Even before takeoff, he looked off the plane, took to the sky. Smooth, unbothered dinner was served, glasses clinked. Laughter floated from business seats, and Lionel sat still, barely eating, just scrolling slowly on his phone. His fingers hesitated every few seconds, tapping, pausing, swiping again, as if he was waiting for something, or maybe trying to avoid something else. Then, around 40 minutes into the flight, it happened. The moment the notification, one soft ping from his phone, one vibration on the tray table. He blinked, looked down. For it was a tweet, then another. A flood of headlines right after Lionel Boyce nominated for Best Supporting Actor, Emmys 2025. The Bear's heart gets its recognition. Boyce stuns critics with deep, real performance. The whole internet was lighting up. His name was trending. Everyone was celebrating except him. He stared at the screen, not smiling, not shocked, just pale, completely still. His breathing grew heavier, his chest rising faster. With each second, his hands slowly moved to remove his headphones, one ear then the other. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, phone clutched in his hand. As if it were burning through his skin, his lips moved, muttering something no one could hear. That's when the passenger next to him, a woman in her 40s with a sharp suit and sharper eyes, leaned in slightly. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't respond. Then it happened so fast, so loud, Lionel stood too quickly. His tray table slammed upward, a water glass tipped and shattered on the floor. Heads turned, passengers startled. Flight attendants froze mid-step, legs shook. He reached for the overhead bin, but didn't open it. His breathing had turned into gasps, rapid, uncontrolled. One flight attendant approached. "Sir, please take your seat, are you?" But she didn't finish the sentence because Lionel collapsed right there in the aisle. Sharp thud as his knees hit the floor. His body leaned forward. One hand clutched his chest, the other gripping the seat's armrest. He wasn't unconscious, but he wasn't okay. People stood, phones came out. Whispers turned to panic. The seatbelt sign still on, but no one was sitting anymore. "Get help," someone shouted. "Is there a doctor on board?" The crew scrambled. One attendant ran to the front. Another opened the emergency medical kit and threw it all. Lionel just stayed there, breathing like he couldn't get enough air, eyes wide like he was somewhere else entirely. The pilot was notified. The co-pilot took control, and within minutes a decision was made. They were turning around. A celebrity panic attack, a medical emergency, a star on the verge of collapse. This was no ordinary moment. This was the unraveling of something much deeper. And as the jet banked back toward the East Coast, nobody knew, not even Lionel himself, that this breakdown was only the beginning. Jet cut through the clouds as quietly as it could, but inside the cabin, the silence was suffocating. Paramedics were already waiting on the ground. But they weren't the ones people were worried about. Every single eye on that flight, every voice hushed in confusion. It's locked onto one person, Lionel Boyce, curled in the corner of the galley floor, sweat on his forehead. Eyes red like he hadn't blinked in hours' flight. Attendants whispered behind the curtain. The pilot made announcements with the calm voice of a man trained for war zones, but the truth was, no one had seen anything like this, because this wasn't turbulence. This wasn't a medical condition. Anyone recognized this was something else, emotionally, raw, and impossible to hide from one. Passenger, a nurse from Atlanta, kneeled beside Lionel with soft hands and a whisper. She asked him if he'd taken anything, if he needed insulin, if he could breathe. He didn't answer at first. He just shook his head, tiny, twitchy movements like he was afraid to even speak. But when he did, when he finally muttered a few words, the nurse's face changed. She sat back, eyes wide. What? And slowly looked at the others. Because what Lionel had whispered wasn't about pain or medication. It wasn't even about the nomination, he said. I'm not supposed to win this. I wasn't even supposed to be here. And they're going to tear me apart. Nobody understood. Not really, but for anyone watching, it wasn't just a breakdown anymore. It was a confession. The flight landed. Early emergency vehicles surrounded the plane. Lionel was escorted off quietly. No handcuffs, no stretchers. Just two men in black jackets and an airport medic flanking him, trying not to attract cameras. But of course, that didn't work by the time the sun rose. Hashtags had already started trending. Asterisk. Hashtag Lionel Boyce collapse. Hashtag in-flight emergency. Hashtag what happened to Lionel? No one had answers, just grainy videos, a few passenger interviews, and way too much speculation. Was it a panic attack? Was he high? Did he have a heart condition? Was it a publicity stunt? The truth was still locked away behind closed doors, but not for long back in Los Angeles. The Emmy buzz was building. The cast of The Bear had started. Celebrating publicists were lining up talk show slots, red carpet appearances, behind-the-scenes features. The whole machine was ready to launch, but Lionel was missing. His phone was off. His reps weren't returning calls. Even his co-stars didn't know where he was. He had gone dark completely until a single photo leaked, one blurry shot. Posted anonymously, deleted within minutes, but not before it spread like wildfire. It showed Lionel sitting alone in the corner of a hospital hallway, hands in. His hair, eyes on the floor, a hospital bracelet barely visible on his wrist. No context, no caption, just one image. And suddenly the story shifted. People weren't asking if he was on drugs anymore. They were asking if he was okay, week past still. No word from Lionel, but those close to him, really close, started speaking to the press off the record end. What they said, what they hinted at was chilling, that this wasn't about the Emmy, that the flight was just the surface, that Lionel had been struggling behind the scenes for months, and no one had seen it. They said the pressure had been building, the sudden fame, the expectations, the spotlight, and something else, something tied to his past, something even his closest friends refused to name out loud. A family issue, a betrayal, a warning he'd received weeks earlier about what could happen if he stepped too far into the light. Was it a threat? Was it paranoia? Or was Lionel Boyce being silenced? Whatever it was, the story had taken a turn, and what was once a celebration was now a mystery, unraveling in real time. The Emmy nomination wasn't the climax. It was the trigger, and the fall had only just begun. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no official statement from Lionel Boyce. No red carpet appearance, no thank you posts, no late-night interviews with forced laughter and bright studio lights, just silence. But the industry doesn't wait for anyone, even its wounded. And in his absence, a darker narrative started creeping in, from gossip blogs, from anonymous insiders, from people who once claimed to be his friends. They started talking about the old Lionel, about his time before The Bear, before the breakout success, before the applause. One former college friend, hidden behind a voice modulator in an exclusive podcast, said Lionel had always been intense, focused but distant, like he was carrying something heavier than the rest of them, like he knew even then that the price of success would come due eventually. Another said he used to write letters to himself, actual handwritten letters. He'd keep them folded in his jacket, read them during rehearsals. Nobody knew what was in them. But one guy claimed to have read one by accident, and it said, "Don't forget who's watching, stay small, stay quiet." It sounded paranoid, even threatening, but now, in light of everything, people started to wonder, Then came the leak. It wasn't much at first, just a photo, a blurry scan of what looked like a therapist's intake form with Lionel's name blacked out poorly, too poorly, as if someone wanted it to be found. The bottom of the page, one sentence was circled in red ink: patient. Expresses recurring fear of public recognition leading to harm. No context, no signature, but the internet lit up like wildfire. People started connecting the dots. The emotional collapse, the plane, the hospital, the silence. Was Lionel suffering from delusional paranoia, or was there a real threat? Then came the voicemail. No one knows how it got out. But one YouTube channel posted it, then took it down, and reposted it 3 hours later under a fair use defense. It was grainy, distorted, clearly left on someone's phone weeks before the flight, but the voice, though muffled, was unmistakably Lion. Alsha's tone was low, tired, but frantic in a way that made your skin crawl. If anything happens to me, if something goes wrong, it's not just me. They know how to bury stories. I've seen it happen. This nomination wasn't supposed to happen. I kept my head down. I did everything they asked. Now it's too late. And silence, a click, and nothing more. Suddenly the collapse wasn't just a moment, it was a message. Journalists who had once praised Lionel's Emmy performance started pulling back. Networks removed his face from promo posters. Articles were edited quietly, phrases like rising star placed with troubled actor, as if he'd done something wrong, as if he was the problem. But the fans didn't believe it. They pushed back hard. Hashtag Justice for Lionel trended within hours of the voicemail leak. Celebrities started to weigh in, some cautiously, some more boldly. Jeremy Allen White tweeted, "Lionel's the realest one in this business. Whatever's happening, he doesn't deserve this." Io Edebiri posted a photo of Lionel from set. No caption, just a heart emoji. But it spoke volumes, because the people who knew him, who had worked beside him, knew there was something real underneath. All this noise, something broken, something scared, but not something dangerous. Then the tipping point arrived. TMZ posted exclusive footage, grainy security cam footage of Lionel just 2 days before the flight. In a diner alone, wearing the same the jacket he wore on the plane, but it wasn't the jacket that sent chills through everyone. Watching it was who he was talking to. Man face obscured, hat pulled low, but he wasn't a stranger. Internet sleuths did what they do best, and within 6 hours, they had a name. A former studio exec fired 2 years ago in a sexual misconduct scandal, silenced, vanished, and now somehow meeting privately with Lionel Boyce just days before his mental collapse. Why? What were they talking about? And more importantly, what was Lionel trying to warn us about? This was no longer just a story about an actor cracking under pressure. This was about something buried deep inside the walls of Hollywood, and Lionel, whether he meant to or not, had opened the door. The footage didn't lie. Lionel Boyce had met with a man whose name Hollywood had erased, a man who had vanished after a sudden scandal, a man tied to projects buried, contracts shredded, reputations destroyed. But now he was back, hidden in a diner booth, face half-shadowed, leaning in toward Lionel, and Lionel stiff alert, looking over his shoulder more than once. This wasn't a fan meet. This wasn't casual. This was a warning. For the first time since the flight, the public was starting to piece together a different story. This wasn't just an emotional collapse. This was pressure. This was fear. This was Lionel trapped between something powerful, something dangerous. The diner footage triggered an avalanche. Old emails, leaked screenshots from a production assistant who once worked on the bare messages that suggested Lionel had been under pressure to tone down his acceptance speeches, that he had been explicitly told not to mention certain names if he won, and that he'd responded with just 3 words, "I'm not afraid." But someone somewhere clearly wanted him to be weak after the diner footage dropped. A second voicemail leaked, this one longer, rougher. Lionel's voice was hoarse. He sounded like he hadn't slept in days. It's not about the nomination. It's about what the nomination represents. I stayed quiet, kept my head down. But once your name hits that list, people start digging. They start remembering. And then they start threatening. I don't know who's listening. I just needed to say it out loud before it's too late. The message ended abruptly with the sound of a door slamming. The reaction was instant. Fans flooded comment sections demanding accountability, asking the same haunting question over and over again. What did Lionel know? Then something strange happened. A red carpet event, Another network, another show-an actor, a friend of Lionel's, was interviewed live. The reporter asked if he had spoken to Lionel. The actor smiled awkwardly, then said, "I probably shouldn't say this, but Lionel warned me last. Year 2, keep receipts. He told me the walls have ears in this business." I thought he was being paranoid. I don't anymore. The reporter laughed nervously. The actor didn't that. Clip went viral. The tone had shifted. No longer curiosity, now full-blown suspicion behind. The Scene studios began issuing subtle denials emails to journalists, reminding them that mental health is personal and private. Attempts to spin the story back toward a simple panic attack, but no one was buying it because, if it was just stress, if it was just fame, then why was Lionel still gone? Why had his entire team gone silent? Why were close friends under NDA? Why had the hospital refused to confirm whether he'd ever been admitted? And, most of all, why had no one, not one person, in power come out to defend him publicly? Then came the final crack. A former network employee, whose name was redacted from official Emmy archives, posted a tweet that would change everything. We tried to shut him up 3 times. He kept showing up anyway. That nomination was never supposed to happen. Now everyone's scrambling. It was deleted 5 minutes later, but by then screenshots had gone global. Reddit threads exploded. Private forums unearthed conversations dating back over a year. Whispers that Lionel had been investigating something that connected a showrunner, a producer, and the same exec he was seen with in that diner. Some said it was financial, some said it was about abuse. Some said it was deeper, more sinister, a cover-up going back a decade. Whatever the truth was, Lionel had gotten too close in the Emmy nomination. The thing that was supposed to crown his career had pulled back the curtain instead. People were no longer asking if Lionel was okay, they were asking if he was safe, because silence from a man that honest was the loudest noise of all. And somewhere, behind studio gates, behind private jets, behind agents and lawyers and cameras, someone was hoping the world would forget. But it wasn't working, because Lionel's fall wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. They thought we'd forget, that the shock would fade, that the headlines would move on to the next scandal, the next meltdown, the next distraction. But Lionel Boyce's silence had become something different now. It wasn't fear anymore. It was power, because in that absence and the quiet left behind, people started digging deeper. Not tabloids, not gossip sites, real people, independent voices, investigative minds who weren't bought and couldn't be shut down. And what they found was chilling whistleblower documents from inside one of the major streaming networks. Contained redacted memos about talent compliance, internal language referring to actors who needed to stay aligned with the narrative. One file, labeled L.B., contained behavioral notes, mentions of off-script interviews, private meetings flagged by PR teams, and finally, a single sentence underlined 3 times in red: potential risk, unpredictable under public pressure. That was it. That was the moment Lionel stopped being a rising star and started being a threat. 3 months after the flight, Lionel resurfaced, not with a press conference, not with a glamorized tell-all, but with a single post of video, black screen, no music, just his voice. Low, raspy, measured. They wanted me to smile and say thank you. I tried. I really did. But I couldn't fake it anymore. I saw what they do to people who ask questions. I saw what they tried to do to me, and if I disappeared without saying anything, they would have won. Image A tables stacked with files, dates, emails, contracts, all real, all damning. And then the words, "This is just the beginning." The internet exploded within days. 3 former studio employees came forward, backed by legal teams. They confirmed that Lionel had been investigating the misappropriation of actor royalties, that he had uncovered forged contracts connected to canceled shows, that his Emmy nomination had made him too visible to shut down quietly. He had gone public. Not for attention, not for revenge, but for protection, because once the world was watching, they couldn't erase him anymore. News outlets scrambled to keep up. Networks issued panic statements claiming full cooperation, announcing internal investigations. But no one believed them, because Lionel didn't just blow the whistle. He tore the hole. House-down talk show hosts were forced to address the story. Actors who had once stayed silent now posted in support screenshots of Lionel's texts. Old behind-the-scenes videos, moments of him standing up for interns, calling out toxic behavior. All the things the industry tried to frame as difficult, now redefined as bravery. And, in the middle of it all, The Emmy Awards approached, and everyone had the same question: would Lionel show up the night of the Emmys? The cameras panned the red carpet one by one. The stars arrived, flashing smiles, wearing names of designers, but the tension was real. The room felt different then, without warning. The crowd turned. A quiet cheer rippled through the back of the theater, and Lionel Boyce in that same red jacket walked in. No entourage, no flashing grin, just him standing tall. The applause grew stronger, louder, until the whole room was on its feet, not because of the nomination, not because of the bear, but because of the fight, because of the risk he took, because he didn't collapse under pressure. He rose through it. When his category was called, the room held its breath. The card opened, the pause, and the Emmy goes to Lionel Boyce. The cheers, the cameras, the lights all pointed at him, but he didn't rush to the stage. He walked slowly, deliberately. He took the mic, looked out over a sea of people, and said, "This doesn't belong to just me. It belongs to the ones who stayed quiet. It's the ones who were erased, the ones still fighting. If my name had to break the silence, so be it." No music played him off. No teleprompter cut his speech. They let him speak because this time no one could stop him. The collapse that began at 38,000 feet had become a global reckoning, and Lionel Boyce was no longer the victim of a moment. He was the voice of a movement, and the world was finally listening. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, shocked you, or made you question what really happens behind the spotlight, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more intense deep dives just like this one. This is more than entertainment. These are the stories they don't want told, and voices that deserve to be heard in. Till next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, sometimes the truth isn't just hidden, it's buried well. Dig it up together. See you in the next one.